there everyone, my name is Andrew, and this is Canadian Starships. Welcome to update number 12 on the 1000 scale Enterprise D Galaxy class project, and we are going into full warp speed in this update. That's right, we are going to be installing the warp nacelles onto the model. You would have seen in the last update that a good chunk of the construction is done. The saucer top has to go on. That'll be done after the electronics go into the saucer section. But the other major thing is that the warp nacelles need to be attached to the pylons. And as you might remember, we were waiting for replacement nacelles to come. They arrived. They look so much better than the original parts. And I've gone ahead and started to work on the port nacelle to see just how much work it's going to take to get those to look good when the two halves go together. And I'm really happy with the way that they're turning out. So I will make sure that I show you that. So the goal in this update is to get those warp nacelles installed. That's going to involve preparing those parts. It's going to be involved doing the light blocking on the inside. It's going to involve wiring up the lighting that's going inside them with the chiller grills, the navigation lights, and the Bizarre Collector lights. And in this case, Bizarre Collectors is a whole piece that pops onto the front of the warp nacelle. So it's going to be interesting to get all that isolated and installed and connected properly. So if I get that accomplished, both warp nacelles installed and working in this update, I am going to be one happy modeler. So that is awesome. We also have some other projects on the bench, so I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on my schedule. So while the Enterprise D is going on, there are times when I can't work on it because either epoxy is drying, paint will be drying, hopefully once we get everything assembled. So while that's happening, I have two Enterprise E's 1400 scale on the bench. One is a static non-lighted kit, which will get the full paint detail. The other is a fully lighted kit, which will take full advantage of all of the Arduino stuff that we have R&D'd in partnership with Danny on the Enterprise D. So that's going to be really fun to see how all of that comes together. Then in January, I have a 1400 scale Enterprise D on the schedule, and so that's going to take us pretty much right to this time next year. So if you have been thinking about maybe ordering a project, just be aware that right now I am booking for starting projects summer 2023, and that's where things are right now. But let's get right to the project today. But before we get started, why not take a moment and click the subscribe button, and while you're here, click on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Here we have the new warp nacelles, and these are so much better than the ones that came with the original kit. Now this is the port marked by the P on the back there, and they're the ones that I have already, mostly processed. And if I put them together like so, they're starting to look really good. It's really hard to see on the translucent resin, but and there's going to be a little bit of a gap there until it gets epoxied together and clamped down, but it's starting to look really flat and linear. The chiller grills on the back are linear compared to the original ones. And what I ended up doing, I started out by using my Dremel to try to clean this up, because I wanted to try to preserve, if you can see here, there's a recessed area here and then raised sections here, and those are supposed to be location points to help the parts go together. But when you get rid of all of this jagged seam line flashing, and there's a chunk of it on this one here, on this particular half, really you get rid of the recessed portion, which means that you then have to equally get rid of the raised section on the opposite side. So I ended up using my belt sander to get a nice flat even sand, and I'm just going to line these up manually without the location points, and I think that they will look quite nice. There's going to be some putty, obviously, that needs to happen in the front here. The seam will get filled with the epoxy as that goes together, and I will create some sort of light blocking area here to keep the blue light and the red Bizarre Collector light separate. So this one has been done, and I think when I go to do the starboard section, I'm just going to make use of the belt sander. It's going to go a lot faster. You just have to be very, very attuned to how far you take it, because you don't want to take any of the chiller grill design out, because there's 4 grills along the length here, and you want all 4 to show up when it's lighted with the nice copper wash over top of it when the lights are off, and the blue glow when the lights are on. So this one is pretty much good to go. This one needs to have the work done. So both nacelle parts have been fully cleaned up. All the excess material has been removed. Now you might notice that this part is a little bit of a different color than these. The reason for that is I actually messed up on this part. Here's my confessional. I went too far on the belt sander on the back end of this nacelle bottom piece, but fortunately the bottom piece of the starboard nacelle of the original nacelle parts was the best out of the 4 pieces. The other parts were really badly warped. This one's not too bad, so I will be able to make good use of that piece because I had cleaned that up very nicely and it matches well with that top piece there. What I need to do next is figure out exactly where the flashers go on the back here. Pretty sure that this is clearly indicated on the studio model. I'm going to need to work out where this one goes. I will look at the film footage and the studio model to do that. I also will need to find the places to drill the holes for the wires on the port nacelle. The access holes on the starboard were already drilled in there. I also want to add some light blocking inside. There's not going to be a huge amount because, well, you want to make sure that the blue glow of the LED comes through nicely, but you don't want extra light coming through. So just to protect the paint job on the back and leave most of the extra coats on the inside, I will do some light blocking. So need to find out where those nav lights go, get these parts cleaned up, get those holes drilled in, install those lights, and get some light block paint done. Looking at the reference material, we've got a shot of the Enterprise D, the big model, in Generations, and if I run it, you can see where those flashers are top and bottom on the warp nacelle. So let's bring in a photograph of the actual studio model, and this right here is where the light goes. So that's going to be very easy to find. Now, the bottom one was a little trickier. That little mark there, that's going to be our light. I'm just going to blow it up here a little bit. So looks like it's just before the curve starts, and we're going to run that center to this point. So I'm going to find center, find just before the curve to figure out where that hole needs to be drilled, and then we will measure that up and recreate that on the other side so that they are equal. So that's where those are going to go. So we've got the one right there. This one's going to be nice and simple to locate. Light blocking's done on the inside of the warp nacelles. Now you'll see that it's not exactly the most pristine paint work, but it doesn't need to be. It just needs to be enough to assist the hull paint in blocking the light. And the shape of the inside of this made it difficult to tape, so what I ended up doing was using liquid mask in here and painted the liquid mask in. That's why you've got a little bit of a jaggedy edge here, but that's perfectly okay. This is just to assist the paint on the outside of the hull from blocking the light. We also have our 0402 SMD lights in place for the navigational lights. Just a quick note, these do not appear on the TV show version, only on the Generations movie version. But there and there, they look quite nice and in scale. They've been epoxied on the outside, epoxied on the inside, and these are now ready. I'm pretty sure these are ready for the bottom sections to be attached to the pylons, and then we're going to build everything up from there, starting with the LED strips for the warp chiller grills. We are going to create blocks for the front here that the 5mm lights will go into for the bizarre collectors. The light block pieces will prevent the blue from the chiller grills showing up in the bizarre collectors and vice versa. So that's what we're going to do. I might create these parts first, just wrap these together with elastic bands, get my sizing for the Bizarre caps light blockers, and then get these pieces. The bottom ones are the ones with the holes here. That's for the plasma conduits. I mean the wiring to come through. Get those attached and get the lighting going. And we're really going to see this thing take shape now. So looking ahead to the Bizarre Collector, what I'm seeing, and I did notice this before, but the way that the kit has been developed, there's this really odd shape with harsh edges inside the Bizarre Collector, which is in the viewable area, and you can see how that's been milled out in here. Now there is lots of space, so I think instead of the light blocker going on the nacelle part where the chillers are, I think it's going to go right in here. But I'm trying to figure out what we might want to, how we want to deal with this odd shape. And my thought at the moment, and I will do a small test so that if it doesn't work, it's not a huge deal. I might fill this area in here with resin. And if that works, and I don't mind if these are a little bit heavier than they are, if that works, I may then go ahead and embed the LEDs directly into the resin so that they are well secured in. And then if they're fully secured into resin and covered, then we just put our black paint in here to light block that from the warp nacelle. So I'm not entirely sure if that's going to work or not, but I think that's what I'm going to try. A couple of things to bring you up to speed on. First, you can tell that the warp nacelle bottoms have been installed. They look like they're fairly level. It's hard on a garage kit to get them perfectly level, but I think that they are quite level there. I've also got the first layer of resin installed into the Bizarre collectors to the point where the LEDs will go into. I have test run the 4 LEDs that are going to be going into the Bizarre collectors for their 24-hour stress test. So I'm going to be getting those installed. What I'm probably going to do is install the Bizarre on the bottom half. Let me just see if I can get the right side here. And that's going to allow me to connect the wiring properly, and then I'll be able to put the top of the nacelle on top of that. And that'll be an easy way to close everything up. So that's where things are at. I did lose a couple of the identifying wraps on the wires, so I'm gonna have to do a little bit of testing just to make sure that I identify the correct wires here. They just came off. It's very thin wire. Came off as they were coming through the access points in the nacelle. So I've got to test some of that out before I wire up too much, but I'm going to get the LEDs wired together, get them embedded into the Bizarres, and then we're going to be starting to wire up everything into these warp nacelles. The Bizarres have been wired up. There's the 2 LEDs in there. You've got your 2 positives, your 2 negatives, a data that's also chained into the second LED. They are nicely embedded, you can see them there, into the resin, and I've done a white coat inside and then a black light blocking coat inside there. The white is going to help the light from the 2 LEDs shine nicely and fill that Bizarre collector cap, but the black, which is tulip paint in there, is going to protect the warp chiller grills from getting any of that red light, and we don't want to make purple in either the Bizarres or the chiller grills. So we've got that light blocking there. That's so much easier than trying to create a panel to put in there. And I'm glad that that was a solution that worked out. This is significant progress. Both Bizarre collectors are fully installed onto the bottom section of the warp nacelles. I was originally going to close up the 2 halves of the warp nacelle and then add the Bizarre collector to the front, but I figured that would make things a lot harder for wiring. So I've got them attached to the bottom section right now, and that allows me to have this cradle to do all of the other wiring for the bottom nav, the Bizarres, and for the LED strips for the chiller grills. The only one that's going to be a little bit difficult is the top nav, because I'll have to wire that up and then be careful how I keep the 2 halves going. I want to make sure that the wiring isn't loose inside either. So that's going to be the next step. I'm going to trace down which wires these are. The blues here are easy because I've got the black marker on it, but the markers on these other ones fell off when I was putting the warp nacelle on and off the pylon. So I will just have to track down which wire is which so I know what to connect to the Bizards, to the chillers, to the nav lights. Warp chiller grills are installed. They are functioning. The red Bizards are functioning. They've been all wired up. The only thing not wired up so far is the navigation lights. They will be done before the top section goes on, and this is not a perfect display of the lights because I've just rigged up 2 Arduinos to do this, and I'm not the programmer, so I've just got it at least functioning for now, and it is just a test to make sure that all the wiring has been done properly. So the next step is to get the navigation lights set up on this one and the cap on, and then I've obviously got to reproduce everything over on the other side. Warp chiller grill LEDs are wired in along with the LEDs for the Bizarre collectors. I will test those to make sure that everything's been wired properly and good connections. I still need to wire up the LEDs for the navigational lights at the back end of the nacelles. But before I do that, I need to take some of these data wires. Actually, I need to take all the data wires and add a resistor to them. I forgot to do that when I was wiring this up. This is just the 2 portions of the wire connected, so I need to split them here and add the appropriate value resistor for the data connection, and I figure I'll do that before I test out the LEDs. That way I don't need to continue using a resistor on the breadboard. Here's the last look at the port nacelle before it is closed up. I have the navigation lights all wired up. Everything's tucked nice and neatly inside, and all I need to do with the wiring is make sure that these 2 small wires for the navigation lights are also nice and neatly tucked inside, and then I have to make sure that this gets closed up properly. Now I need to do some adjustment with the chiller grill LEDs inside so that it can close up properly, but I'm going to be doing all this off camera because this is work that needs full attention and I cannot be distracted with the camera when I do it. And there we go, both nacelles are complete. The port side nacelle went together, no fuss, no hassles, fit really well. I had to adjust the LED strip on the inside so that it would close properly. The starboard nacelle here did give me more trouble, doesn't fit as well, and there is some seam issues that I will have to deal with once the epoxy has cured, and I won't risk this popping off. But apart from that, the warp engines are assembled. And with the warp engines installed and closed up, that is going to be it for this update on the Enterprise D project. I hope that you've enjoyed it. We are really making some great progress. I am really looking forward to getting the construction phase of this project done, which I'm hoping, you know, fingers crossed, is going to happen in the next update where we get the saucer top on. In order to do that, we'll need to get the internal lighting for the windows and everything installed, and the top items, the phaser strip up there and the navigation lights connected to the bottom saucer, and get the whole thing epoxied on. If I can get through that in the next update, it's not going to be a whole lot of time before we get into the wonderful stage of painting. And painting this project, I think, is going to be such a fun experience. But we still have a bit of ways to get there, and I still do have refinement work that has to happen, especially on that starboard nacelle. There are some gaps in there. I'm just hoping when I pull the clamps off that it's fully secured together, that I can get some epoxy in there to kind of sculpt that back and fill those gaps. And it's tedious work, and it's going to take a bit of time, but I think it's going to turn out pretty well once everything is said and done. And you know, once the copper wash gets on the outside of those chiller grills, you know, it's just gonna pop really nicely. But that is it for this update. I hope that you've really enjoyed it. If you did, make sure that you hit that like button. If you're new to my channel or you haven't done so yet, why not hit that subscribe button today? We are very close to our 1,000 subscriber goal for the 1,000 scale Enterprise D project. Now, I think I've been saying that for the last few updates that we are so close. I think we have something like 967 subscribers at the time of this recording. I would love to see us get over that 1,000 mark with this update. So if you haven't done so yet, click that subscribe button. You'll make me very happy if you do. But for now, my name is Andrew, and this is Canadian Starships. Have a great day, everyone.